Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the session, How the Right Digital Strategy Can Help Smaller Staffing Firms Punch Above Their Weight and Grab More Market Share. For this session, Ceipal is joined by Terry Gallagher, President, CEO of Gallagher & Consultants, Bradley Cooper, Associate Director, Systems Administrator, STAR Workshop Solution. And moderating the session, we have James Lucier, Executive Vice President, ProcureWise. But before we launch into today's session, there are a few housekeeping items to cover. First, each session will be recorded and available on demand through Ceipal's website. A follow-up email will be sent to all registrants with the recording and any other relevant material. All participants have entered the session muted. Audience questions can be placed in the Q&A tab or session chat window. Our speakers will try to address them by the conclusion of the session. If there's not enough time to address all of the questions, our speakers will work to publish a Q&A as a follow-up to the session. And finally, we're on a strict schedule today. To ensure we are on time, I'll give a 5-minute warning to our speakers, and after that, the speakers will conclude their conversation. Please note the session will end promptly at the scheduled time. At that point, we encourage you to visit our agenda tab and explore our other topics and speakers in the 4 different tracks. If you do not visit the agenda tab, you'll automatically be redirected into the next session on this track. And that's it. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today. Terry Gallagher founded the fastest growing women-owned global gig workforce strategies consulting firm, Gallagher & Consultants. Bradley has over 15 years of experience in IT, brand marketing, recruiting, field support, and medical treatment. And James Lucier, Executive Vice President, ProcureWise, is responsible for executing go-to-market strategies and building client-driven growth and driving the success of ProcureWise. And with that, over to you, James.
Thank you, Spring. Good morning, Bradley. Good morning, Terry.
Good morning, James.
Spring. Good morning, James. Jim, as I call him.
Welcome to the audience. Thank you for joining us. We're really glad to have Terry and Bradley here to give some unique insights into something that they've worked on together. And, think about the title of the session that you've just joined. Who wouldn't want to be able to punch above their weight, right? So before I kind of start into my questions, Terry and Bradley, Terry, why don't you just kind of set the stage for us in terms of kind of, describing your relationship and how you and Bradley have worked together. And then I'll ask some questions, that the audience will be interested in.
Absolutely. So Bradley and I have been working side by side for almost 2 years, and Set and Service Resources, SASR, Workforce Solutions, brought us in as a consulting arm to kind of help them with their transformation. And we're going to kind of talk a little bit about the pieces and parts that we helped with, but they are a very progressive company, and they are very much open to, bringing in outside resources to help along that journey, because they were very serious about what they wanted to accomplish. So Bradley will talk a little bit about his role, but I think everyone's mostly here to listen to Bradley, certainly not the consulting arm, but we will try to add as much value as possible, because he lived and breathed it, and he's going to share a lot of those really kind of tangible tidbits that everybody wants to know.
Well, thank you. And on that note, Bradley, before we get into the questions, why don't you just set us up a little bit on how things started for you and why you went to Terry?
Yeah, absolutely. So SASR Workforce Solutions, about 2.5 years ago, just as they started changing the focus, originally, I guess we were kind of a double company in the way that we were a technology company and a staffing company. We started saying, well, which one do we want to be, right? Do we want to be a tech company and provide staffing technology, or do we want to be the best staffing industry leading company out there? So that really changed the mindset of, well, if we're going to be the best staffing company, that's where we need to focus. But to do that, we need to be technology enabled. And so once we started down that pathway, even though we had some subject matter experts within the organization, we knew we didn't know everything that we needed to know. And so, we brought on Terry to help, from her insights, and then some other other consulting partners as well that could really help us understand where we needed to make the most change. And that's what kind of kicked off this whole process.
Mm-hmm.
So Terry, it sounds like that Bradley was looking for help with trying to address some challenges and some opportunities to really grow their firm. And that's how you got engaged. So, what were those things? What were the challenges that maybe needed to be addressed, or things that needed to be fixed, and opportunities that could be captured?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, Bradley's right in bringing in Gallagher. One of the things that we noticed right away is that Sasser had a very clear vision about what they wanted to accomplish. So I think for anyone out there that's listening, that's really important. And they had very specific directives around, like Bradley said, they don't want to be a tech company. They had a very fragmented and expansive tech stack. So that was another thing that they were looking at. But the leadership is also a very progressive company. The leadership really is all about embracing technology. And I think that sets the culture. And so looking at those clear directives and vision, a lot of what they wanted to accomplish is the core focus was on the candidate experience and improving that. And I think that that's something that a lot of the audience is very focused on, despite the fact that there are Candy Award winners, even before we came in, even before they selected these providers. That was something that they wanted to focus on even before this digital transformation was implemented. So, looking at consolidating the tech stack, looking at improving that candidate experience, more ROI in the recruiter's time, and then really just focusing on, what do we need to do to spend more time with the clients, less time chasing down candidates and drowning in kind of this underutilized candidate database. And I think that was priority one. And then as we looked at, and Gallagher kind of helped them with the solution providers, as we vetted the solution providers coming in, it was all through the lens of these problems that needed to be fixed. Very specific, right from the evaluation process to implementation and even post-launch, which we'll talk about in a minute. And so to Bradley's point, they brought in outside expertise like Gallagher and some of our consultants to kind of help with that piece. But I think that was core, that they knew what they wanted to do, they embraced technology, and they were very specific about what they needed to fix. And then they held our feet to the fire to make sure that those things were being fixed throughout the implementation. So I'll hand it over to Bradley to kind of talk about, more, go drill down on that a little bit.
Yeah, no, and definitely great points. And I appreciate that summary of kind of where we were at, Terry. So I think the main thing is, we have a very well-defined, very operational homegrown technology that does the deployment and redeployment of our labor force extremely well. So we recognize we have a very strong piece of technology there, but the gaps that we had, as Terry mentioned, like in the candidate experience and being able to engage and redeploy some of the workforce that might, kind of fall off. Just due to the various circumstances, with Sasser having a workforce that covers the entire U.S. And then sometimes very transactional workforce, or in a way a gig workforce. Those folks that are engaged and work with us day in and day out, that full-time employee, they do very well and they stay engaged and look for work. Whereas it's that folks that come in, there might be an opportunity in their area for a couple weeks or a month, really engaged, but then something changes, they fall out. So we recognized, on that part, is we didn't really have a great technology integrations or partners or setup that to really re-engage that workforce. We've already spent the time to onboard, hire, train, keeping them engaged enough that when there is work that's relevant for them, to come back and go back to work or to stay working. The other part of that was on the candidate life cycle. At the beginning of the life cycle was making it very relevant to the candidate when they want it to be relevant, and putting the human touch at the most important times. So up until really only a few months ago, we kind of had a fragmented entryway into Sasser. So our employees, they would find us on the website, they would go through some of our job board partners, and there were multiple ways that they could kind of end up into our ecosystem. So from a candidate experience, there's some folks that would be highly engaged because we had work in the area. We're ready to get them to work. They're ready to go to work. But somebody that kind of found their way into maybe an area that we weren't as busy in might stay stagnant in the system for a while. So we were really losing opportunity there. And so by working with partners that can really enable our front end candidate experience, we can put who Sasser is in front of them in a very meaningful way, so they can learn our culture, our values, and who we are and what we do before kind of creating an account, before coming into the ecosystem and finding out after that maybe it wasn't the best fit. Now they can make that choice up front. And really, to that point, now the folks that we're interviewing and engaging with are a lot more invested in that process and a lot more invested in what they're looking to accomplish by joining Sasser. And what's really cool to me about it is we go from a 75-day hiring life cycle across the organization now to a 27-day and being able to really be able to get down from like an interview to a hire and almost under a week. And that's only with a couple months of fully, our phase one of our implementation being launched. So we're really bringing that let's give you what you want, where you want it, but let's get you in front of one of our awesome recruiting staff and our talent management staff to, have that human connection with our workers and not just completely technology automated or managed, but it's just technology enabled.
Thank you, Bradley. It sounds like you really had a clear vision and took a clear inventory, right, of where you were and what you wanted to work on. So Terry, how did you get started? What were some of the basic steps you took to get started, and how did you execute them?
Well, I think one of the things that Sasser did, which was very smart and made our job much easier, is that the entire org was really brought into the decision process. It wasn't a top down from the ivory tower. You're going to do this, make this happen. As Bradley said, they started the strategic planning in 2019, bringing in outside help before they even got started. And then they were really thoughtful and kind of building out that roadmap of what they wanted to execute on the digital strategy. And the other interesting thing that they did is, when we started to evaluate providers and assess those providers, and then once the providers were brought in and then we were implementing, Sasser all along that process brought in the recruitment and account management teams to be part of that selection process. They were part of the evaluation process. Then they got in and they tested when we set up the sandbox. So that whole adoption engagement thing was just very organic for them. And they could give us feedback about what was working and what wasn't working. And I think that the other piece of that is that they were able to, one of the things they were also very smart about is contractually obligating solution providers like Gallagher and the tech providers that you need to deliver on some of these challenges around, like Bradley spoke about, the candidate experience, candidate quality. We got to see an improvement in drop rates. Those need to go away. We need to see an improvement in the number of hours worked. And so what we did is we then built a project plan with specific milestones and deliverables in collaboration with the tech provider. And then we walked, in lockstep and said, this is what we need to accomplish during, at this time. And when we ran into roadblocks, which we always do because everyone makes plans, right? And then of course something happens. So, being able to kind of pivot kind of quickly and just making sure that the solution did what it was supposed to do. One of the things that was not anticipated, and Bradley's going to jump into this, and I think a lot of staffing providers can relate, is just the sheer volume of transactions and locations. We had one instance where it overwhelmed the CRM we selected. It overwhelmed their email capabilities. They had to move to a new server. So those are the kinds of things that come up, and you've just got to be really focused on what you want to accomplish and stay to the plan and be able to pivot quickly. I can tell you Gallagher throughout our playbook, I think month 2, we went in with traditional consulting and we're going to have this roadmap and a project plan, and the staffing sector has a very strong bias to action. And we could tell that that wasn't going to work. So we really had to be very agile and execution focused. And we had to have doers on our team, right? So I brought in, consultants that really could kind of jump in and execute versus, PwC the heck out of this and make it super complicated. But Bradley, feel free to add to that. That's my perspective. That's what I experienced.
So how did you see the steps, Bradley?
So I mean, to echo Terry, I mean, I think once again a great summary of kind of what's gone on is from the outset on how to develop the roadmap and kind of where we wanted. Part of it started with a clear just organizational strategic planning, where not only did were we looking at technology, we were looking at the organization, and I was part of the organization at that time, but I wasn't quite part of the initial strategic planning because I was in a different role at the time. But the goal there was to really set out where do we want to become, what is a Sasser of 2030, and then as we started developing that, and we realized like the technology enablement was going to be a huge key factor in where we want to go and grow and scale to. Then as we took the steps to engage Gallagher and our other consultant firms that we worked with, and we learned what those opportunities were, then we went full on. I want to say at one point, I think the week before Thanksgiving, back in 2020, our former founder had about 9 hours of demos lined up, right before Thanksgiving, but it was really to do the due diligence with those partners to really, really understand their products, but give them a chance to really understand Sasser and how we operate. Because I think the gut check that I've learned throughout this process, and with many of the providers that we work with, is you really truly don't understand the scope of the business you're working with until you get hands on. And with, as Terry mentioned, the volume that we work at the diversity of locations, employees, the amount of time that those resets or the work could be, makes like a two-dimensional flat problem into a fourth dimension that you're trying to figure out how do you solve all these problems in all these different ways. And some of the partners we've worked with, they're used to working, I guess, a more traditional staffing where it's based on a branch model and you have locations, and things tend to be a little bit more repeatable. Whereas with us, we have a national workforce that we travel. So we could hire somebody in Atlanta, they could be working in California on Monday, Tuesday, and then we can move them to Nevada on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So with all of those complexities, one of the challenges is don't get so wrapped up in selecting a product just because we need to, is really vetting it out with your partners or the partners you want to work with, making sure they align with your cultures and your values, align with what your roadmap is, so that they are prepared, as Terry mentioned, when you do have those challenges, that when it becomes hard, that they're not like, oh, well, you know what, we have a standard plan, that's how we do it, and we're going to stick with it. They need to be just as agile in their thinking as Sasser was or is. And I think the other note is we just wanted to make sure we included the stakeholders throughout the process. Mm-hmm. So when you look at a talent agent who's placing a person on a job, we need them to be part of that discovery, part of the decision, and part of the implementation, because they're going to be able to say what's important to them day in and day out at their desk, what they're going to manage the folks. So throughout the process is engaging them as early as possible, even if it's just to get some thoughts around what they're seeing, even if the product's not ready for them to test, because they're going to give you insights that you're just not going to think of. And keeping that in mind is important for the technology to perform and do the things that you want to as a business. Having those folks that are going to be the end users, they're going to actually be able to enhance it even further, make it even a better product, because they're going to tell you where the inefficiencies are before you even launch it. And then the last part is also being very agile as an organization with your providers. because there are those times like Terry mentioned, and this has happened multiple times with several of our different partners, is just the sheer volume we work at. It stresses those communication tools. We've burnt phone numbers out on SMS before. We've hit.
Welcome to my world, Jim. 2 years, just saying.
Yeah. So, like under PLC and the new laws and the way the carriers are managing that and the campaign registry, you don't think about it, but, for example, I was looking at it the other day, just in a week period, we sent almost 8,000 text messages that help us do auto scheduling to remind people of shifts. So when you're talking in the hundreds of thousands of volume, it quickly tests and you hit kind of caps for some of your partners, because they didn't recognize when you say high volume, they think, oh yeah, a couple thousand, not bad. But the repeat nature of everything exponentially increases that. So having partners that are just invested, that are willing to say, okay, we're going to work on fixing this. We as an organization also had to say, well, what can we kind of adapt as things are being enhanced and rolled out to production on those new, those partners? Are there ways that we can adapt our process in the interim that might be a little painful, maybe take a little bit more time, because we know the end goal is we're going to have this really great product that we built together. So that's a key kind of goal, is not being so rigid ourselves and saying that we can't do this if there's a little hiccup in the product. Because if we're collaborative and we really work together, it benefits everybody in the long run, because most of the time when we're asking for something like that, it's not only just a SASR benefit, it's going to be a global benefit to all of their other partners, all of their other clients, especially as they grow and scale. They won't run into the same problem. So that's just kind of the mindset that we keep.
I think to add to that too, Bradley, you brought up something really important that I think the audience is going to want to know. They used all their resources. They didn't go out and hire new people or hire a project manager. They just took their teams that they had and said, hey, you're going to be doing something different. So Bradley was not a project manager a year and a half ago. Him and I kind of grew up together around this project, and he stepped into this role beautifully, did an amazing job. So for everyone out there, you don't have to go and hire a bunch of new people. You repurpose who you have, and then you march together.
I think that's a good to know, good to hear comment for sure. So we're learning a lot, and I think you said you embarked on this in 2019, at least beginning to think about it, right? So it's the beginning of 2022. I'm sure everyone's wondering already, how did it go? Right?
How did it go?
What are some of the outcomes? Are you successful? What are you seeing? What's it translating to into revenue, profitability, however you'd like to express it?
You just mentioned my entire contract. So one thing that SASR is very smart about is they put that in our agreement. Like, this needs to work. We need to see results. And Gallagher, we actually had some financial skin in the game. Like, if this doesn't work and generate X amount of revenue, we literally structured the contract full money back guarantee, which everyone said I was crazy. But I said, no, that's the only way that we can go in and put some skin in the game. But I think there's something I want to say that's really powerful here. And for anyone that's listening on the call, all of the digital, the really cool, transformative technology, talent supply, moving the needle things are not happening with the big providers. And I might be alienating some of them on this call, but it's happening with the companies like SASR. It's the small to mid-market that are like pivoting. They're open to bringing on different products. They'll try something. If it doesn't work, they'll try something else. They'll take their teams and wrap around that. So I think that they are the next gen of advanced talent supply. I think it's going to be coming from the small to mid markets. As far as whether this worked, yes, there's been some improvements. SASR's environment is very complex, which Bradley kind of mentioned, and so we're kind of working through product post-implementation team to kind of work on some things that post-launch still need a little bit of tweaking. But SASR said themselves, when Bradley went out to the team, they said they're definitely leaps and bounds ahead of where they were from candidate flow, drop rate, some of those things that they mentioned. We realize this is more of a journey and incremental improvements, as you optimize the tech. Because you got to remember, they've had this situation for years. There's other clients out there that have been with Bullhorn or other products, and I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to mention other products, and they've been there 5 years, and there's all these processes. So really considering the complexity, I think, we did really, really well, as far as post-launch, but it is more of a journey. The other thing that Sasser started doing is running the numbers, like, did this work? And so we are seeing some improvements around, and Bradley will get into this because he's a numbers guy, but, signups to working has improved, accepted to working has improved. There's more billable hours per placement. So we're looking at metrics like that says, are we making more money? But we're, a few months post-launch. So we launched October 12th. So it's probably too soon to tell on the bigger vision. But from my perspective, I think that we've seen progress. Bradley, I don't know what your opinion is. Hopefully.
Early on, Bradley, early on post-launch.
Hopefully we're aligned, or Gallagher's not going to be around very long.
Yeah, definitely aligned. I think I want to highlight one thing that you said, Terry, was the incremental. So back in my military days, I was responsible for kind of launching some of our healthcare software within our organization, and it was kind of all or nothing. Like, you have to have everything ready, launch it today. Whereas we're not really using that model of, like, let's build everything and then just have a big party and say it's here and hope it works. Mm-hmm. Is we're incrementally in this roadmap moving forward. So if there's part of a product we can release and go operational, we're realizing the gains of the improvement on those immediate. So it's 3 weeks, a month, 2 months, 6 months. Not waiting for 2023 when every, because quickly we're still going to have multiple tech providers within the Sasser ecosystem, because we're picking what we feel are the best of the best to provide the service. But whereas we had 40 or 50 or 60 because we also own technology, now we're going to have 4 or 5 really strong partners. That each one of those comes with an implementation. Each one of those comes with a integration plan. So if we can get one part of that up and running, that makes us more efficient. That starts letting us have access to, Terry mentioned the data, so we can start making more informed decisions as a business, as a section, like our recruiting team. They have better insights now to their workflows, what they're doing every day, what their interview process looks like. So those are real wins throughout the process. So one of the key mindsets there is really being iterative, because if you're really going to it with a mindset of, well, we're going to spend the next 1.5 years, 2 years, and we're going to get there and we're going to launch it, you're not realizing opportunity throughout the process. So when Terry mentioned phase 1, or we talk about that first part that's been implemented, I would say we're about 90% there with that technology partner. There's a few little enhancements we're waiting on, just because, once again, the way Sasser operates, but it's also probably going to stay 90% for the rest of the year, because we're waiting on our other partners to come online to do the full integration, and then I'll consider it 100%. So to kind of go back to the wins and how things are shaping, not only are we seeing real results with the technology, we've actually shaped and changed our business processes, because the technology's enabled us to do things like consolidate the candidate flow into recruiting. So our recruiters own the candidate from their initial screening to the interview to the offer, to actually helping them through their onboarding process. Because, once again, we do that national company based out of North Carolina, out of Raleigh. We don't have field offices. We don't have, an HR staff or a recruiting staff that somebody can go to in person. So, being that each candidate now has that personal connection to that recruiter that's bringing them into our company, that's helping drive down, as I mentioned, kind of in the opening,
And I think that's part of your culture, Bradley. That is core to who you guys are, is that personal connection. Yep. And that Canadian experience. They were very bullish on ensuring that was the epicenter of what they created, right? I mean, that's who you guys are.
Yep, absolutely. Is the, all of our mission, our values, everything, the individual is centered within those themes, right? It's great people providing, positive impact, things like that. And so by changing our business processes, and we've actually been able to have the technology enable us, and then we're enabling the technology. So when you're looking for some of those returns that you set out to gain, and you're not quite there in the process and the phase, you might not say, hey, here's a direct correlation to cost savings in recruiting, advertisement, or hiring. But you start peeling it back and you look at process efficiency and some of those soft costs that you might not have taken into consideration. You look at your reduction in turnover rates. And so just, those things start coming up if you start thinking about it. So kind of want to, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but leaning into this into 2020, right as the pandemic and all of the challenges everybody saw, and we felt those just as much as any other organization. But we made the choice. We leaned into it. We're going to make our technology change. It took us 45,000 people to sign up to our ecosystem in 2020 to get the staffing we needed. Last year it was 22,000. So, we cut it almost in half. And then when it came to being able to redeploy and being more engaged with our workers, we increased the average hours by like 44 hours per individual worker. So, those steps, small incremental change, but we're realizing those as we progress through our technology roadmap. And then part of that is also a data strategy, is harnessing the power of our data around all of that, so we can start getting those insights, so we can understand that, we went from 45,000 to 22,000. We had a 1 in 6 conversion rate to a hired to worker. Now it's 1 in 4. Because without understanding that and having access to it, you're really kind of flying blind, because you're making those assumptions that, it's always a 1 in 10 conversion rate. Well, that's great to kind of have it as a baseline. But when you start thinking about job marketing and deploying, and when you're meeting with your clients to talk about, hey, we can service this location. Well, if it's 1 in 10, then our approach is going to be, well, I'm going to have to, get 1,000 people on deck to get the folks that you need in that area. And it might not support that. But as we refine this and we get better and better, we become more consultative, and we can say, yep, absolutely. We know, because our technology has enabled us to know what the average apply rates are, what's the average conversion in that location, how long are those people that we're hiring, how long are they staying engaged with Sasser? And then another one of the, I guess, just really big results I noticed, and this is fairly recent that we were able to look at it, because we're only a few months post-launch. We wanted to kind of get enough time under our belt to really look at it, because when you're looking at holistically over a year how much folks are working, stuff like that, a couple months aren't quite apples to apples. But one of the key things that we didn't really have insight on, and we do now, is in that hiring process, we close the gates to Sasser, meaning we have one apply path for everyone that comes into our system. So those folks that I mentioned that fell out, that go, we don't really terminate our employee force, and unless there's a real HR reason. We allow people to go inactive so they can come online, go to work when it's available for them, and then they could drop inactive for a couple months, a year. We're seeing about 40% of the folks that are coming back to our pipeline are folks that we've already hired, we've already placed, we've already worked, but they fell out of the ecosystem long enough that it was almost like they were kind of reapplying to Sasser. So through some of our communication efforts, we're starting to re-engage that stagnant workforce. So there are people that already have experience with our clients, or people that already have experience with us as a company. Their expectations are already there of what to expect as a job seeker. So that, once again, kind of goes back to the soft cost as well, of less time in the interview process, less time in the onboarding process and stuff. So the expectation is we bring in more of those tech providers. I mean, part of that, we're still assessing a couple other large parts of our business for the tech providers there that haven't been decided on yet. We'll see those incremental changes And the key is just to keep that in mind, that if you do it incrementally, you hit milestones throughout, you're going to see real change, real improvements, realize there's an impact to the revenue, impact to the candidate employee experience, there's no reason not to do it, because it's making the entire thing much better for everybody you interact with.
I think that last sentence right there. I was at a forum last week, and I talked to a number of staffing firm owners and leaders, and I think realizing that, well, first of all, like the title of our session, they want to punch above their weight. And maybe realizing that in order to do that, they need to digitally transform their agency, their business. At the same time, there are fears and concerns, right? What could go wrong? What might happen? Things like that. So let's talk about at least some lessons learned. Maybe not everything went perfectly, or maybe you found out something you didn't.
Of course it did, Jim.
What happened?
It's a consulting firm. I'll keep this short and sweet because I want to leave time for questions. The biggest things for me, Bradley hit on it, how long it really takes to implement, right, and optimize the tech. The second thing we learned is get the product design folks involved sooner rather than later, not post-implementation folks, not the training folks, but, get them involved post-launch to kind of refine some of these things. And then the biggest thing for us is staffing. And we worked with other staffing companies. They have a strong bias for action, and they have very little appetite for over-engineered project plans and methodologies and templates. And, you really have to be agile in the way that you do things. You have to be a doer. You have to be able to pivot. I threw out my playbook so many times. I even hired, some really expensive consultants because I thought that's what we needed to do and bring them in. And they were certainly valuable, but we also had to pivot in the resources that we were providing. And we needed doers and we needed executors. So that was what I picked up. Bradley?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, a total agreement there. I mean, I think the only thing to really add is you don't know what you don't know, right? And that's any part of it. As you choose partners, you're not the expert in that technology. That's why you're hiring that partner, right? So you're going to learn things about their product that there was just no way to really find out in the demonstrations, the discovery. And it's the same for them as much as they can sit and do a process audit, follow your team through everything. When it really comes down to the development part of it, what has to be customized. And that for us, there's a lot of custom, and I think it's the same for many staffing agencies out there that have homegrown their technology that they use is when you own it, you just do it. So, like, hey, this is a great idea. We want to give this opportunity for our employees or our clients or our internal staff. You just go build it. And so what we want is to be able to take the best of that, marry it with the best of our new product and solutions. So when you hit a roadblock, because they're definitely going to be there, is take the emotional part of it out. I think that's the key thing is don't get angry, don't get frustrated, don't place blame that somebody didn't sell the right product or they didn't give this to you in discovery. It's a learning pathway. So the key is you hit that roadblock, stop, have a discussion, a collaborative discussion with the partners. It can't be siloed of what Sasser wants and what the partner wants. It's the partner and Sasser has to, so any implementation team, you have to have that honest discussion of like, this is a business requirement. We need this to work. But we can also work with you and understand that this is your product. And so let's develop the best way we can bring that solution to both of our organizations or both of our partners. And by doing that, it lets you have that agility to keep the process moving. And I think that's the biggest takeaway I would say is just, you're going to have those things that come up you'd never planned for. Nobody would be able to. And if you can have an honest, collaborative discussion and do it quickly, it keeps you from stalling out and just not progressing. So,
And Bradley, we have a bunch of questions, and I know it's all because of you.
We do have a couple. I also want to mention that for the audience that we've put the LinkedIn profile links of Bradley and Terry in the chat window, and also Terry's firm. Is in there, and Bradley should be. We'll put Bradley's in. But so there's a question here about digital ads. Is that part of the strategy? Can you talk to that at all? And did you make, is there something in your tech stack or with the digital transformation that affected advertising?
That's all you, Bradley.
Yeah, absolutely. So, staffing organization, we've got partnerships with all the major job boards out there. We use programmatic tools. We have direct relationships. Part of our operational change was to really develop a sales and marketing department, which we didn't have before. So that was the position I was in before, as I was a recruitment marketer. So I kind of led all of that digital advertisement. So we're leaning in once again into learning about what we need to do with social media. We revamped our website. We're starting to do things like the blog post. We just launched a great article about about the topics that we're talking about now. And then we're using those in media, being able to get the sound bites, being able to
Is that on the website, Bradley? Yeah, by the way, the white paper?
Yeah, I do believe so. I think that's there, along with some really great blog posts from like our managing directors and stuff on all parts of our business. So we're repurposing those in advertisement, using some of that as content. So I think that plan is still being developed. I think we're really heavily focused on B2B right now, is really learning and developing our marketing strategy, but we're always keeping B2C, our employees out there. So.
Thank you, Bradley. And, Spring just came on. She's going to close us out probably in maybe, Terry, if you could take half a minute. We've talked about Sasser, but what about everybody else in our audience? What's the one takeaway you'd like to give them if they want to get started in this digital transformation process?
I think hopefully we gave you something useful, but just start. It doesn't all have to be perfect day one. Just start. Use what you have where you are, and just start. That's
Great.
it.
All right. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Bradley. Spring?
Thank you, everyone. What a wonderfully engaging session it was. And it was great having you all with us today. I'd like to thank everyone for joining in, and we encourage you to visit our agenda tab and explore our other topics and speakers in the 4 different tracks. Just a reminder, if you do not visit the agenda tab, you will automatically be rolled into the next session when it starts in just a few minutes.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.